G'day and thanks for joining us for another Australia Talks. I'm DK and I'm joined as always by my lovely co-host Ardeet. Today is Thursday, the 4th of June, 2026, and our topics this week are an AUKUS update. The deal has been altered. Pray they don't alter it again. And traditional fishermen are being recruited to stop a sea urchin plague. Of course, we've got our Two Ticks Town talk, and then we'll jump into this week in Australian history, and we'll finish off, as always, with the 4X bottle top trivia. But before we get into all of that, we need a favor from you all. If you enjoy the show, the best thing you can do to help us out is just share it with a friend. We'd be grateful for a review if you feel so inclined as well. This helps us grow the podcast and keeps us making more of the show that you love. All right, that out of the way, let's catch up with the last week. Ardeet, hello. How has your week gone?
Hello, DK. My week's gone pretty well. We managed to get as if I had anything to do with it. Mother Nature gave us some rain. So that was
you weren't out there doing a rain dance or
something? Yeah, exactly. It was all down to me. Yeah, so no, we got some rain. Had a bit stormy yesterday, a bit of wind blowing, but no, it was nice to actually get some water on the ground. So I got my broccoli and cauliflower and cabbage and Brussels sprouts punnets planted, and also giving coriander another try. I mean, the number of times I've planted coriander and it's just started to come along, I thought this is tremendous, and that just goes. It's like I come out one morning and it's all bolted to seed. So hopefully planting it when it's a bit cooler, and I had planted in the shade of some parsley and a chili bush. So I'll give it another go. It's always trying. So because I like coriander. Actually, a lot of people aren't a big fan for coriander or cilantro for our American and Spanish speaking listeners. Well, does coriander do anything for you?
No, so I'm not one of those people that have where it tastes like soap or something. Yeah. So like I don't mind it. I wouldn't say it's like one of my favorite flavors, but like it's fine. My sister has the soap thing though, which is quite interesting because I think it's like a genetic thing. So she has it, and as a result, really struggles with certain foods. So I'll be sitting there enjoying it going, this is delicious. And she'll be like, I can't eat it. It's horrible. So if you are afflicted by this, I empathize, but I'll eat the delicious food that you won't.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, I was just wondering because it's a very mixed thing. And then saw the bloke, the surgeon did the hernia op 6 weeks ago now, and was all happy.
I can't believe that was 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. So that went well. I took him in a bag of lime because our lime tree at the moment is just pumping out limes. So yeah, took him in a bag, and he was excited to get that. He apparently loves limes. So I thought, that's obviously hit the mark, which was good. So yeah, that's all done and dusted. The chapter closed on that one. So he said, don't go from 0 to 100, but said, just get back into the normal swing of things. So that's all good. So it's been a pretty good week. What about you? How's your week gone?
So I'm still getting over my sickness. I've just been pretty flat, and unfortunately, I have spread it amongst my friends and family. So I apologize to them if they're listening. As a result, I've also like kind of deliberately socially isolated myself from some other family members, some older family members that I know are potentially a bit more, vulnerable to this sort of illness. So, So yeah, it's kind of been a bit boring of a week because I've been sick, and then I've also kind of just deliberately not been doing anything. So I don't really have much to say other than hopefully I'll be fighting fit next week. I apologize if my voice and I'm still a bit nasally is annoying to anyone as they're listening to this, but there's nothing I can do about it. So sorry, but not sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
I did get some time to do quite a large Two Ticks Town talk this week. So
okay.
I preemptively apologize. I think normally our Two Ticks Town Talks are around about, I don't know, about 1,000 words or something like this. This one's closer to 2,000. So I'll try and talk quickly and get through it, but it is quite interesting, at least to me. Good. So hopefully everyone will enjoy it. So
look, that's the thing. At the end of the day, you don't know who's going to enjoy it with all the mates of podcast out there. But for me, it's did I enjoy learning about it? Did I find this particular link to some town or topic interesting? So, good. I'll be looking forward to that.
As a result, let's get stuck in to our AUKUS update. The deal has been altered. At a security conference in Singapore last weekend, the three AUKUS partners, the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, announced a tweak to the partnership that has generated quite a lot of attention in Canberra and elsewhere. And the media circus around this is actually quite frustrating to me personally. But anyway, Australia will now receive 3 second-hand nuclear-powered Virginia-class submarines in the coming years, instead of the original deal of 2 used and 1 brand new. Analysts have also asked why language previously adopted by the three nations, which said Australia would acquire between 3 and 5 Virginia-class submarines, appears to have disappeared from the most recent statement as well. Our Defence Minister, Mr. Miles, told the ABC in Singapore that there were no changes to the AUKUS deal and that it was the same agreement that has always been, indicating that Australia could still move to purchase a further 2 submarines if they were needed. But he also said that the government was intent on getting the Australian build up and running as soon as possible to ensure that the 2 additional Virginia-class submarines were not necessary. He specifically said, quote, "The plan is to have 3 that take us through. That's definitely what we're seeking to achieve. That's the same arrangement that's always been, but we want to see that the first Australian-built submarine come off the production line. That's the key thing here. In that context, it will be 3, end quote. And I think he's kind of butchered what he's trying to say, but if you didn't quite get that, the idea is we'll get.
Okay. Oh, good. I thought that was me. I was listening. I think, hang on, am I missing some context here? Oh, yeah. No, he didn't say that particularly well.
No, he really didn't. He's sort of, I think, a bit of a soundbite, as he was sort of probably on the run. But basically what he's saying is the idea and the focus, and I think that's the key word here, the focus of the media is a bit all over this. The focus is we are going, the 3 Virginia-class submarines are a stopgap. They are to be replaced by the new AUKUS submarines. So the idea is hopefully we will only need 3. If we need more, we will have the option to. But the idea is we can focus on getting the AUKUS designed submarines built and into service, and therefore we won't need the additional 2 Virginia-class submarines. So the government remains confident that the US will sell the submarines to Australia in the next decade, but of course, there is no guarantee that that will happen. The White House will still have to sign off on the sale, and it will only do so if it can lift stubbornly low submarine production rates at US shipyards. We've spoken about this before, and Australia has invested in those shipyards so that this will happen. It also should be noted that not all Virginia-class submarines are the same, and this has been some analysts' big issue with this change. The new boat that the US has promised that the US had previously promised would have been from the Block 6, the most recent design. So just to put this into a bit of layman's terms,
please.
The US Virginia-class submarine has what they call 6 blocks. Previously, they would have probably called them Mark versions. So As we understand it, there are slight variations between models of, broadly speaking, they are the same, but there are slight tweaks and changes depending on operational requirements or maybe new technologies that come along and those sorts of things. Think of like if you've ever been on like a Boeing 737 or something like that. There are a number of different sizes of that aircraft, even though it is the same type of aircraft. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So the same sort of idea. Australia's submarines will now likely all come from Block 4, which is carries the biggest difference is that it carries quite a smaller weapon payload, and firepower, of course, is a measure of a fighting ship's utility, and having the largest weapon capability is a key ingredient for battle success. But there is some method to the madness here. Mr. Miles explained what was planned was for the Royal Australian Navy to operate 2 used and 1 brand new Virginia-class submarine, which, with the current in-service Collins-class submarines that we already have and the new AUKUS-class submarines that would be coming on, that would be 4 separate submarine classes. Okay? He clarified this by saying, quote, "That gets pretty complicated in terms of how you're operating a fleet of submarines. What we will have here, meaning the changes, is a much simpler pathway. It will mean that the Virginia-class submarines that we are acquiring will be of the same type, and I cannot overstate the significance of that, both in terms of the submariners who are operating them, but also in the people who are working on them to sustain these submarines. Chasing simplicity is at the heart of why we have pursued this. Doing it this way may also be a bit cheaper. So firstly, we are paying an amount to the US in terms of its industrial base. That is to create space for the Virginia-class submarines to be transferred to Australia. This is the investment that we've already made into the US shipbuilding facilities. But then there is the purchase price in respect to each of the submarines, and this will be more cost effective in relation to that, and it will be significant." End quote. So basically what he's saying is having the Block 4 Virginia-class submarine is cheaper because these are older warships. They are less technically complex, and we are keeping them of the same type, which is really important in terms of crew ability to move between vessels. It also means we've got a much simpler payload outcome, so logistically it makes more sense. If you've got one ship of a class or boat in a class that requires significantly more ammunition because it does have a higher capability, that puts strain on the logistical chain. So now you have to have 2 separate logistics chains for the same, in theory, the same ship of the class. It becomes, it just complicates everything the whole way through the line. So to me,
if you throw a trailer onto a ute, it seems like it's not a huge change, but all of a sudden you've got to cater for almost double the load capacity.
Pretty much. I think that's a good layman's way of trying to think about it. It's like, or imagine if you've got a fleet of vans because you're like a plumbing business or something like that, and you've got 3 vans, and then you go and buy a ute, and suddenly you're like, well, hang on, it's same but different. It still gets me from A to B, but
that's
the way I have
analogy.
to.
Yep.
Yeah, the way I have to load it out and everything like that, nothing quite works. Like everything's a little bit different in a way that's quite frustrating. I should have just bought another van. It's the same sort of idea. And I think it really should be noted that these aren't just some old, worn-out warships either, which I have seen in the media, people kind of going, oh, we're getting screwed over, we're getting their old, second-hand crap. The oldest of the boats in Block 4 was commissioned in 2020. So at most, these are 6-year-old vessels. And they are still very much fighting fit, cutting-edge pieces of technology that will be more advanced than pretty much any other vessel in the Royal Australian Navy has ever operated to this point. So I feel like
the Collins class submarines. What was that? Was that 80s, early 90s that we got them?
I think they were designed in the 80s, went into the water in the 90s. Let me double check.
Yeah, and you know, obviously with the fact that we're buying this, they're getting retired, or you know, phased out. But they're still decently capable. Obviously, you know, they're old tech, but you know, it's not as if they're death traps or anything, is it?
No, you're right. So they were designed in 1987, and the construction was through the 90s, with the final one being handed over in 2003. So the oldest commissioned Collins class was commissioned in 1996.
Right.
So, yes, they are quite long in the tooth. They are still capable and very, very deadly. But you're right. Like, they're not death traps, but, like, we need to replace them, right? Like, they are, they very much need to, you know, which is what this program is primarily about at the end of the day. But the Virginia class submarines that you know, these quote unquote secondhand submarines, of my mind, this completely makes sense. I'm quite frustrated with the media circus around this over the last few days. And what's even more frustrating is all of this kind of overshadowed what I think is a much more interesting announcement, and that the three AUKUS partners also agreed on developing unmanned undersea vehicles. AUKUS said in a joint statement that the delivery of the vehicles would start in 2027. So this program sounds to me like it's possibly already underway. The program will improve the three nations' reconnaissance strike capabilities and bolster superiority in anti-submarine, anti-surface warfare, mine countermeasures, electronic warfare, and contested littoral maneuver, the statement said. And the program comes after AUKUS's so-called Pillar 2 to develop advanced defense technologies, including quantum computing, undersea, hypersonic, artificial intelligence, and cyber technology, which we've mentioned this Pillar 2, which I actually think in some ways is the most important part of the AUKUS defense agreement, because it encompasses so much more than just submarines. If you don't know what AUKUS Pillar 2 is, there are some links in the show notes about AUKUS, and you can go and have a read. It is really, really interesting, and we've spoken about it before. But at this time, we don't really know much more about this new agreement, let's call it, or additional agreement about the unmanned surface vehicles. What we do know is the UK has committed $170 million to the program so far, but both the US and Australia have not revealed their spending commitments as of yet. Obviously, my immediate thoughts go to the Ghost Shark unmanned submarine that's being developed here in Australia with US partners, and I do wonder if the Ghost Shark was either the catalyst for this new program, or if, because the delivery is meant to start in 2027, if this is basically the US and UK have seen the capabilities of this program and just kind of gone, yeah, let's just throw that in the back of the you know, like we're taking that with us as well. Yeah. We'll add that to AUKUS. You know, maybe we'll throw some more money at it. We might change, like, tweak the design a little bit, you know, make a couple of improvements, but broadly speaking, because with the vehicle delivery date of 2027, that's 6 months away. So this program has to be already, we're not developing a whole new vehicle in my mind, right? The timeline's too short. So
yeah,
I am very
6
curious.
or 18, it depends how, and right, bureaucrats would probably do 18. However, it doesn't matter whether you cut it to 6 or 18 and even waiting on a couple of months delay, it's imminent.
Exactly. It very much is imminent. So how do you feel, I guess, the two things on the submarines? Are you surprised by this change? And also, like, how do you feel about the media kind of circus that's been around this? There's a lot of negativity in this space around AUKUS. And also the new undersea reconnaissance program, did that kind of surprise you? Did that come out of left field? Because I felt like it did for me a little bit. I didn't see that coming.
On the deal itself, look, I feel with these big defence deals, I'm never particularly surprised when details change, conditions aren't met, timelines blow out and costs blow out. That's, unfortunately, that's part and parcel of it. I think it's fair enough to throw up a flag and say, oh, hang on, it wasn't quite what we thought we were going to get in terms of what was sold to the Australian public. So I can understand a few people taking a little bit of a step back. However, I do think that the communication, particularly from, and I've got to give Miles a big tick on this one. The communication on this one has been very, very good, to the point where him explaining those details about the advantages of what we're getting, how it's still within the framework of the agreement, and explaining away the it being 3 rather than something people thinking it's going to be 5, and why that's still an option, but why it might be. Well, it would actually be better for Australia if it did only turn out to be 3, because that would mean we'd produce 2 ourselves. I thought his communication on this was particularly good. For me, my initial thing was when I saw that the headlines and the and all that, and thinking, oh God, don't tell me we're going to get shafted here. Didn't take very long to think, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense to me. So to me, in terms of this happening, despite personal views, in terms of this happening, I'm pretty comfortable with what's happening on there and what has been explained. I also think too, there's a lot to be said for that similarity in the ships, in the subs. I tend to think that's probably going to turn out to be more of a plus than we realise, particularly as you have a very easy swapping of crews about. You have the ability to pass on knowledge between 3 separate ships from, crew member. Because, look, obviously there's the training, there's the people high up and doing that. But, the day-to-day people who are actually, doing the crap all around the place, they're going to say, listen, I know we're meant to be doing this, but, for argument's sake, you need to give those levers an extra tap on this, and that applies to all of them. And you get that real useful knowledge that can be transferred rather than each one being a learning experience. So I personally think that's going to be a positive. I can see a very strong argument for that, to the point where I think, interesting that the original agreement didn't go down that path anyway, but I suppose there's always the glittery, shiny, GXL Kakadu version of it that gets bedazzles some of the politicians at the end of the day. Say, no, you just want to get this thing that's going to get you to A and B and do the job properly. Media circus, look, I mean, it's there is a lot of meat on the AUKUS topic. The media doing their job. I think they're ginning up a lot of discontent because, look, it's Trump related. It's also Albo related. So you've got more right wing leaning media here. It's like it's a chance to have a go at him. It's big money. It's a big. It's a big deal. It's big stakes. So it can divide people. It can get people very polarized. Look. The media circus shits you a bit with it, but that's their job. That's what they're doing, and I think for people who particularly care, it doesn't take much reading through the lines, or for people like me who aren't particularly knowledgeable about a lot of these details. It doesn't take much to go through and listen to something like Miles is saying. do a bit of verification, jump onto an AI, jump onto a site and think, oh, okay, that actually makes sense to me. In terms of the Ghost Shark, wasn't it? The one that's essentially surprised both of us a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah. In terms of the Ghost Shark, look, mates of the podcast who've been with us for a little while remember DK and I talking about it, I don't know how many months back, and we were both pretty impressed with the idea and very happy about it being Australian tech. To see it get adopted so quickly and pushed into here, I think you're right. I think it must have, because I think last time we talked about it, it was there was some sort of test. I can't remember the details of it, but I'm guessing it was sort of like oh, bloody hell, that's pretty good. Let's get that happening. So look, we'll see how it takes, if it does get delivered on time. But they're the milestones that have been put out there. So I'm pretty stoked about that, and I think it's potentially another good area where we can get a bit of more industrialisation happening in Australia, which is something that we tend to push. Also, please, and this sort of cuts across. Probably cuts across the media circus and the actual deal. There seems to have been less, concern and jumping up in surprise about the actual nuclear aspect. It's like that hurdle's gotten over. Now, it won't be the last time it comes up. As soon as it starts becoming more concrete, you will get, you'll get objections and that. But it's something that was a big, big red flag for a lot of people at first, and now it's sort of like, it's turned into much less of an issue. I think that's interesting to observe. And look, the bottom line for me, I suppose, is there's ideal versus practical, and I still think this has come down to a very practical deal, and I think this change, to me, seems to be a practical outcome. So, what do you think about the change in the deal? Or same thing. What do you think about the change in the deal, the media circus, and the adoption of the Ghost Shark in such an accelerated time frame?
I think the media circus has bothered me probably more than anything else about this, because the changing of the deal, in my mind, it hasn't really changed. If anything, it's just streamlined it. We've just gone, do you know what, actually, this is a better way to go forward, and the US is probably more accommodating in that space as well, because they're going to want their fleet. Let's be honest, the US no one has ever transferred nuclear submarine technology from one country to another. Like, it's never happened before. This is unprecedented, particularly the US, because the US submarines arguably are the best, or some of the best in the world, right? So this is a huge, huge deal for one sovereign nation to peacefully transfer technology to another in a way like this. It's never happened before. And so Australia is, at the end of the day, as much as we might not want to say it, but Australia is the junior partner in this relationship out of the three, right? We take what we can get, and we should be thankful, because at the end of the day, there is the US and UK together are very strong, and they share a lot of technology, not with us, between each other, but we've been brought into the big boy table in this deal, and I think that's a really, really, really big deal, and it shouldn't be overstated either. Would we have benefited by having 3 brand new Block 6 Virginia-class submarines? Absolutely. Like, would that have been better? Sure. But the reality is that the US isn't going to want to transfer that capability and miss out on it themselves. So I think it's worth remembering that the only way the US is going to transfer this technology to anyone is if they are not going to be put out themselves. So that's where the big Australian investment, several $1 billion have been transferred to the US to build up their shipbuilding capability, their industry, so that they can pump more of these vessels out, so that they have the capability and we can take the, because they're not gonna put themselves in a position where they don't have enough. I think actually, and I could be wrong about this, but I think that the US, like Congress has a law that the US must maintain so many submarines like in the fleet at any one time or something like that. So there is like, and I think that's also why the US has maintained basically the veto power to be like, we will only give you the submarines when we're ready to. Because it is a bit more complicated than just handing over the keys and, there's fuel in it. She's still running, don't speed too much with it. There's a lot. This is it's not just buying a used car or something like that, So this to me it just makes sense. The US is more likely to be willing to hand over some of the oldest ships in the class, which I cannot stress this enough, are not that old. They're not that worn out. It's not that big of a deal. Probably. I don't know the state of the interior of the Virginia class submarines, but I would imagine that they're going to be completely fine and fit for service for what we want them for.
They won't be handed over with prawns in the curtain rod.
Nice. Exactly. Obviously, like submarines, pressure hulls do wear out and things like that. There are consumable parts on any machine and so on and so forth. So, but it's also in the US's best interest. Like we're not getting a bargain bin deal or anything like that. Like I feel like the media needs to have some faith that our leaders are actually trying to do the right thing here. And I feel like that's where I get really quite frustrated in this context. I saw a lot of articles. Even there's one linked from The Conversation, who's generally very, very good with their journalistic quality. And I was pretty disappointed with the article that they wrote about this. It very much focused on the fact that we're sort of getting a bad deal and we should have got the Block 6 and all of this kind of stuff. And this is going to kind of play into the Tootick's Town talk that we have in a minute. But we need to be kind of careful and mindful that we don't overextend our ability to maintain fuel and arm these submarines, because
that's a good point.
This is not a cheap endeavor, and we know we keep seeing the headline cost and but at the end of the day, like, these are extremely complex machines. I would say the only thing that's more complex, or arguably as complex as these nuclear powered submarines, are maybe some of the spacecraft that are currently in service being sent literally into space. These are not like regular ships. They are so complex machines, and as a result, they're very, very expensive. And the ammunition they use across all realms, whether they be from missiles to torpedoes and things like that, are very expensive. We're talking millions of dollars a go. So if we had the bigger Block 6, it's more of a financial burden on Australia. It's more of a maintenance burden. It's more crew burden. Like it's more in every way, which I'm not sure that that's actually the direction we should be going in. And I think it's actually a good idea if we just stick with the Block 4, which is better than anything we have. It's a serious piece of machinery that gives us a massive leg up, but also is kind of within the capability and the defense budget that we have. So I really feel like Miles hasn't done a good job of explaining that. And I know there's a lot going on at the minute, but like, I really feel like someone needs to explain this idea a little bit better to the lay person. What we just decided to call the ghost shark situation. We don't know that it's the ghost shark, but for all intents and purposes, I think it's going to be some sort of combination of, if it's not the ghost shark, the US and I believe the UK were also designing their own similar capability. This could be a situation where we all kind of use our own hardware, but maybe they've all got the same software or something like that. So I think Pillar 2 is very exciting for that technology sharing, right? Which is really, really exciting. I'm so grateful for that Pillar 2 exists, because I feel like more than the nuclear submarine technology, Pillar 2 very much puts us at the big boy table of, we are getting in the cutting edge. We're not just sideline junior part. Well, we are a sideline junior partner, but you know what I mean? Like, we're still getting these capabilities and are valued by our more senior partners, because we've got something to contribute as well. So that's really exciting to me. I do think it's got something to do with the ghost shark, but I'm not privy to any information.
Well, that's just
it's speculation on our part.
That is speculation, but we're definitely right. So, no, you're right. It is speculation, but it's well within that, well within what Pillar 2 actually covers. And I think you're right to emphasise that. It's almost like the. I don't know why the Pillar 2 one isn't a little bit more sort of exciting to a lot of things in the maybe it's just because it's so broad and it's not sort of as easy to understand. And the subs, you can point at them and say, big, expensive, nuclear, black, huge, look at them. Whereas Pillar 2, it's sort of a little bit more ephemeral, a little bit more sort of, well, we can't point to that yet and we don't quite know about that. And this sounds a little bit sort of futuristic and pie in the sky. But it's closer than the Pillar 1.
Yeah, and it is happening. Actually, it's funny that you say that, because it is closer than Pillar 1, and I don't think it's been talked about a lot. Actually, I think it was I didn't write down their name, so I can't attribute to this quote to anyone, but someone did say something along those lines of, this is a really long program. It's a 30-year program. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of money spent, and there doesn't seem to really be any direct action yet that anyone can point to and go, oh, well, this is what we're, like people like something to point at, stand in front of and go, this is what we're doing, right? This new commitment kind of feels like a little bit of that, because what wouldn't surprise me is, we know that the Ghost Shark is being manufactured here in Australia. We've spoken about it before. And a lot of the technology on board, a lot of the software is being sort of produced by US-based companies here in Australia. So it wouldn't surprise me if that integration with our US partners has kind of pushed this forward into whatever this new Pillar 2 technology is going to be. And what I hope to see, and we'll probably talk about it when it actually is announced and released properly, is over the next probably couple of months, we'll find out a bit more about exactly what this is. It might not be the Ghost Shark at all. It might be a whole new thing. And the Ghost Shark might be a standalone platform and blah, 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 blah. But the odds are pretty good, I think, that the Ghost Shark's got something to do with it. So, but like you said, I think Pillar 2 is so exciting, and I'm really keen to see how this develops. One thing that it does frustrate a little bit with some of this stuff is it's all so classified that lay people, a lot of it you're never going to hear about. And by the time you do hear about it, it's so old and irrelevant that it's kind of like, you're not so excited anymore. So, which is a little bit disappointing, but that's kind of the nature of the beast. So,
yeah.
All right, enough about submarines. Let's move on. It's time for our 2 Ticks Town Talk.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the desert, square, man. I've breathed the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my...
All right, this week's 2 Ticks Submarine Talk, we're going to stick with the nautical theme. as both of our topics focus on submarine environments. So this week, I'm going to give you a brief rundown on the early Royal Australian Navy's adventures with submarines. And we're going to give very special attention to the J class, which will be towards the end of this, specifically J7. And if you're a bit of a Royal Australian Navy submarine nerd, you'll know exactly why J7 has a very special place in my heart. All right. Let's kick it off. The Royal Australian Navy's submarine force is the submarine element of the Royal Australian Navy, which should be pretty obvious by the name. But what is much more interesting about the submarine force is that it has been established 4 separate times. Huh. The first 3 initial attempts were foiled by wartime losses, bad economic policies, resulting in defense cuts, and the submarine force was multiple times the casualty of that. And I will explain all of those to you as we go. The current submarine force, though, which is, of course, very critical to our defense, was established in 1964. But I'm going to focus on the earlier days, so that will be the second to last time I mention the current force. Don't care about the new stuff, care about the old stuff. After the formation of the Royal Australian Navy upon Federation, a period of uncertainty had followed as the size of the force was yet to be established and determined. Eventually, death by committee. Eventually, this was set at 13 vessels, including 3 submarines. I did do a Twitix Town Talk a couple of months ago on the pre-Federation naval history, specifically focusing on the Queensland Maritime Defence Force, if you are interested in pre-Federation naval history. And we may do some more of that in the future as well. Australia initially wanted 3 small submarines. They figured that would be enough to satisfy their undersea desires. But later, this changed to order 2 of the larger British E-class submarines. These boats were built in Britain in 1913 and arrived in Australia, where they were commissioned as AE1 and AE2 in early 1914. Now, if you are a little bit of a history buff, you probably know what happened in 1914. Of course, I'm referring to war were declared in July 1914 and World War I commenced. So these submarines arrived very much right in the nick of time. AE1 and AE2 were part of the Australian Naval Military Expeditionary Force, say that 5 times fast, sent to German New Guinea, which is now part of Papua New Guinea. Both boats were present at the surrender of Rabaul on the 13th of September 1914. So, great success for their first campaign. The following morning, AE1 sailed with HMAS Parramatta, a river-class destroyer, on a patrol around Cape Gazelle in East New Britain province, what is now Papua New Guinea. She was never heard from again. She completely disappeared and was the first of Australia's major losses in World War I. This was such a mystery that no one had any idea what had happened to her. Obviously, lost with all hands, completely disappeared. No idea what's going on. There's some very, very deep water around the island of New Britain in Papua New Guinea, and it wasn't. So
there hasn't even been any sign of it. It was literally just disappeared.
Gone. Yeah. Sailed out and literally disappeared. There was radio contact on patrol, which was a pretty standard thing, but just went dead silent. HMS Parramatta, that was sort of accompanying it on the patrol, had no idea what happened either. There was no wreckage, no flotsam, nothing. It wasn't until, so remember, this happened in September 1914. It wasn't until December 2017 that the wreck was found, over 103 years later. Oh. The investigation was headed by the National Maritime Museum, and they concluded that a ventilation valve was left open because, of course, you got to remember, the submarines in this time didn't have air conditioning. It basically wasn't a thing. And of course, you can imagine how hot it would be in these vessels in the tropics. So what they suspected happened was a ventilation valve had been left open or had some sort of mechanical failure as she dived, and this caused flooding in the engine room, and of course, subsequently lost power, control, and sank to an unrecoverable depth and was lost with all hands and essentially imploded because of the pressure. So terrifying. Literally have nightmares about things like that. So no, thank you. I'm not a submariner. AE2 had a... I like the sun too much, thanks. AE2 had a much better fate, though. After completing... It also completed a number of patrols around what is now Papua New Guinea, and particularly Fiji, and it was determined that she was of much better use in the Mediterranean than the Pacific. The Pacific War in World War I was short and explosive. Let's call it that. There was a lot all of a sudden, and then there was very, very little because the Germans pretty much were the only real threat. And once they had been subdued, not a lot was going on. AE2 was assigned, basically determined that she was a better use in the Mediterranean, and she was assigned to the Dardanelles campaign. Of course, we know that here in Australia as the Gallipoli campaign. She was the first Entente submarine to penetrate the Dardanelles defenses, and she was literally ordered to run amok inside the Sea of Marmara. Run amok was literally her order. Unfortunately, while stealth may have been her strong suit, gunnery was not. She spent 5 days in the Sea of Marmara attempting to torpedo Ottoman shipping, and she completely failed to hit anything at all. Eventually, she was found because she had to surface. Battery technology was pretty ordinary, as you can imagine, back then. She had to surface to charge her batteries, and an Ottoman torpedo bolt, Sultan Hussar, saw it, came over, attacked it, and the AE2 was quite significantly damaged. As a result, the crew decided that scuttling her was the best form of action, which they did, and all of the crew were captured alive, which is, I think, all things considered, it could have been a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah.
Interestingly, the E-class submarines had a torpedo tube forward and aft, which isn't super interesting, but they also had two broadside submarine tubes, so one firing to the port and one firing to the starboard, which I feel like today that seems like a really wild choice because it's not too often that you would have to shoot a torpedo off to the side. But I guess they were still figuring things out. This was pretty early days in submarine warfare. I should note as well that the E-class, whilst not super successful in Australian hands, the E-class submarines overall was quite a successful design, and Britain built 58 boats, though unfortunately none of them are preserved today, so you can't go see any of them. And that was the end of the first submarine force. Both boats were purchased and lost, and sort of unceremoniously, really. There was, though, an immediate plan to replace them. I think the Australian Admiralty realised that there was absolutely value in these sort of new sort of type of submarine warfare. But the problem they had was World War I was still very much only just beginning. And of course, the British were not in a situation that they wanted to sell any more submarines to Australia. Look, we gave you 2 and you sank them both. So the conversation kind of, wasn't super enthusiastic about selling them off to us at that point in time. During the war, though, Britain had heard rumors of a German submarine, or U-boat as they're called, that was so fast underwater that it could sail alongside and keep up with surface ships. Now, this is fairly common today, that a submarine would be able to move this fast underwater. But of course, back then that wasn't a thing, and it should be said that it is much more difficult to move underwater submerged than it is to move on the surface. Of course, you have a lot more drag. These rumors about these super fast German submarines were false, but that didn't stop the British from designing and building what would become called the J class of boats. These were larger and more powerful than previous British submarine fleets, including the previous E-class we just mentioned. But they were capable of keeping up with the surface fleet on the surface to a point, but they were in fact actually slower underwater than the previous E-class that we just talked about. But they were significantly larger, and like I said, they were faster on the surface as well. The J-class, just to put it in perspective, the new J-class were 274 feet or 84 meters long, while the previously mentioned E-class were 178 feet or 54 meters long. So these were like a third longer than the previous class of boats, which is pretty significant. 7 J-class boats were completed before the end of the war, and they did see service with the Royal Navy, with them being named 1 to 7. J1 successfully attacked 2 German battleships, both of which it significantly damaged, but neither of which sunk. This was off the coast of Gibraltar. And J2 had a bit more success. It sunk U-boat SMU-99 in July 1917 around the Orkney Islands in Scotland. Unfortunately, J6 suffered a friendly fire incident and was lost. So there's 7 boats, but there's actually 6, if that makes sense.
Right.
There's 6 left, I should say. In 1916, the manager of the Cockatoo Island dockyards in Sydney sent a party of 10 to study submarine construction in Britain. They were keen for more submarines. The party didn't return until 1918. So this was quite serious. Further searches for a replacement design were made, but before any real progress could be advanced, the prospect of a gift from the Royal Navy became apparent. Because at the end of the war, the Royal Navy looked to consolidate its large wartime construction program by retiring some of the older ships or ships that were armed with 18-inch torpedoes in favor of the units, the L-class and H-class coastal submarines, which were armed with the new 21-inch torpedoes. Thus, streamlining your armament outside of war is a smart move. And AUKUS has just decided to do the same sort of thing. So the newly built, I can't stress this enough, these were brand new J-class submarines were surplus to requirement as their primary armament had just been deemed obsolete overnight. Still very deadly, but obsolete to the Royal Navy at the time. The Australian government was gifted the entire fleet of J-class submarines, all 6 of them. And fortuitously, Australia had already ordered a submarine tender before the outbreak of the war, HMAS Platypus. This was supposed to be the submarine tender for AE1 and AE2. Of course, they no longer exist, so I think it's kind of the fact that the Australian government hadn't cancelled the submarine tender ship kind of helped push the British government to consider Australia pretty serious about the submarine stuff. And as a result, we'll give you the J-class submarines that were now surplus to requirements, particularly that these were literally brand new as well. at the end of the day, what's the point of a submarine tender if you don't have any submarines for it to look after? I guess I should add as well. A submarine tender is a ship that basically can help maintain and rearm submarines either in port or at sea as well, which at sea obviously has its own complications as your two moving platforms bobbing around in the ocean. Makes things a little bit more difficult. But what was quite common at the time was basically harbors and wharves weren't necessarily equipped for submarines. Was still quite a new technology at the time, and as a result, you may not have all the necessary required equipment and personnel and armament to rearm a submarine. Instead, you may have a submarine tender, a ship that's specifically designed to do that, and you can move that around, which was good. So the submarine tender could follow the submarines, and you can move them from base to base or rearm them in like a harbor, like a natural harbor or something like that, which when you think about the idea that a submarine is a stealthy warship that literally travels underwater, back in these days where you were refueling submarines with oils and things like that, they were running on fuel oils as opposed to like a nuclear submarine, which doesn't really need to be refueled for 25 years. You can start to understand the idea that a submarine tender is quite a useful piece of kit, particularly if you have, several submarines that may be operating in a continent-sized island.
Do they still have submarine tenders?
Not like, yes, there are some countries that do, but they're not what you would call like Australia. The Collins-class submarines don't have a submarine tender.
Okay.
Would it be a useful tool? Possibly, and you definitely can replenish a submarine at sea with other vessels, but we don't have, the Royal Australian Navy doesn't have a dedicated submarine tender like HMAS Platypus was at the time. That was its only purpose, was for that. I'm sure there are probably some navies around still exist where they do have a submarine tender, but it's probably more of a sort of a hangover from previous years. Like, it's still useful, we won't get rid of it yet, but with the advent of better battery technology and better, and particularly nuclear technology, a submarine tender is sort of an antiquated idea. The submarines can get back to port. For example, a nuclear submarine, other than ammunition, the restriction is how much food can you carry, because the submarine's not going to run out of fuel. It can go around the whole world underwater. It's not a problem. So, all right. So the 6 submarines and HMAS Platypus left Britain on the 8th of April 1919. They sailed via Gibraltar, Malta, Suez, Ardennes, Colombo, Singapore, Thursday Island, Moreton Bay, and then they arrived in Sydney on the 15th of July 1919. So quite a journey. On arrival, the need for a program of deep maintenance and battery replacement became quite urgent, given their arduous wartime service, limited maintenance during the war, and breakdowns experienced on the voyage over. Because again, remember, these were new, but, we're talking like 1918 technology.
Yeah.
Short-term repairs were made to all of the boats in 1990 to make sure that they were seaworthy and were in a somewhat usable state. But J3 and J7 entered a deep refit in early 1920. And this was going to last more than a year, while the other 4 boats completed a program of peacetime exercises, cruises, and port visits from their new base in Geelong, Victoria. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. In March 1921, it was calculated the cost of refit had reached £73,500 just for J3 and £110,861 for J7. The Admiralty had previously advised that the annual operating costs for these boats would be £28,300 each. So J7 just absolutely blew the budget in its refit. Ouch. And the heavy expenditure on the submarines, poor material condition of the fleet, and a general cutbacks in naval expenditure in the wake of the war made it clear by mid-1921, basically as soon as that report was released, that the flotilla would have to be reduced to reserve status. status. So reserve status in this context means we're not really going to use them much anymore, but we're going to maintain them. We'll keep them in operational capacity, but we're not super keen to, like, we're sort of, we're not getting rid of them yet.
Sense. Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll see. This is the step before decommissioning, right? So things weren't looking good for our little flotilla of submarines. And by 1922, the government informed the Royal Australian Navy that a further £500,000 cut to the naval estimates was going to be made, leaving the Naval Board with pretty much no option other than to completely lay up the boats, all 6 of them. There were a number of proposals to run a small cadre force at minimal expense with particularly J7, the boat that was in the best condition as it came out of refit. But these proposals weren't really taken up. I think the Naval Board had kind of decided that we're just going to scrap these. Almost all of the boats needed what I would call fairly significant maintenance by this point. The battery technology at the time was a really big limiting factor, and they continuously would have to keep replacing these batteries as they sort of burned out. All boats were progressively de-stored and sold off for disposal. 4 of the submarines, J1, J2, J4, and 5, were scuttled in the Bass Strait, approximately 4 kilometers southwest of the entrance to Port Phillip Bay. They are still there, and they're reasonably popular diving sites. There's not a lot left of them these days, unfortunately. They were put there for bombing practice, and not a single bomb ever hit them, which I think is quite funny. I think I read a quote that said no single bomb came within 200 feet which is about 60 meters of any of them, which, shows you how difficult it is to bomb with 1920s technology. The remaining 2 submarines were scuttled as breakwaters inside Port Phillip Bay, with J3 located near Swan Island in Queenscliff. And you could actually see it on Google Maps. I think it's actually signposted on Google Maps as well. And there's quite a few good photos of it over the years just sitting there. But J7 was the last to go, and she would not go quietly into that good night. There were more proposals of recommissioning her for training specifically, and she was used routinely, her engines, I should say, were used routinely to provide electrical power to the Flinders Naval Depot. Unfortunately, the decision to scrap J7 came on the 16th of January, 1924, even though it was in still fairly good condition after being laid up after her refit. Because again, she really had only just been refitted and then immediately laid up. She hadn't really had much use at all after her refit, which now that I think about it was kind of a waste of money. Anyway, she was described as the last survivor of an obsolete class, and she was eventually disposed of in 1929 when she was sold off to Morris and Watts Machinery Merchants, who dismantled her. They took her engines, which were used, I believe one of them was used into the 1970s to provide electrical power at a machinery workshop, which is pretty incredible.
Wow.
But they dismantled her and they sold the rest of her to the Ports and Harbour Department of Melbourne, who decided that she would be sunk as a breakwater at the Sandringham Yacht Club in August 1930. The Sandringham Yacht Club wanted a breakwater. So this is a yacht club in Port Phillip Bay, and they wanted a breakwater for their little yacht club, and they tried to get a number of surplus vessels, but were unsuccessful. However, they did get the J7, and for fun, she is still there today. So today, the Sandringham Yacht Club is surrounded by a rock wall breakwater, and which just ironically made J7 once again obsolete, this time as a breakwater. But she remains at her duty in the middle of the marina today. You'll find what remains of J7. She's very visible, very much, and actually completely accessible from the wharf. You could step off the pontoon wharf onto her, well, what's left of her. I wouldn't recommend. You probably die of tinnitus immediately. She is
tinnitus or tetanus.
Sorry, tetanus. Yeah, you might get both.
The waves make a real sort of like buzzing sound in your ear.
You might get both. Who knows? Yeah. The ghost of J7 will give you tinnitus. She, as I said, she's very much visible and accessible from the wharf. They literally built the marina around the hull of J7 as she was too difficult and costly to remove. And now she's become a bit of a beloved feature of the Melbourne Marina, and the sailors there, I've heard, have a bit of a soft spot for her. I did try and find out if we could get public access to go and view her. The marina is private property, and as far as I can see, there isn't sort of free public access. But if you are a diehard fan and you ask nicely, I'm sure that they would be happy. Don't pick a day when they're quiet, not like a sailing day or something like that. I'm sure that they would let you walk out into the marina to have a look at it. It's if you go to have a look at their, I've included all of this in the show notes, but if you have a look on Google Maps and of course on their website, you can see the pictures of her. And I particularly like the Google Maps view because it's quite frustratingly in a position that I think would be quite annoying to have to deal with because it's in the middle of the marina. And it's a very nice marina, and then there's just this bang, and it's almost 100 meters long. It's not a small wreck, so it's quite interesting. So that was the death of the submarine service a second time, with the J-class being decommissioned in the early 1920s. The Royal Australian Navy was once again left without a submarine fleet, this time a submarine fleet that didn't have any operational use. And unfortunately, that theme is going to continue because they tried a third time in 1927. It didn't take them long until they were like, yep, we're going to do it again. They purchased two British O-class submarines, HMAS Oxley and HMAS Otway. Unfortunately, very quickly, it became apparent that Australia really could not afford to keep these two submarines, and they were transferred back to the Royal Navy in 1931. And this left Australia without a submarine fleet in World War II. We did not have a Royal Australian Navy submarine fleet in World War II. But we did host a lot of submarines in Fremantle and Brisbane. These, of course, were Allied submarines. And Fremantle became the second largest submarine base, only second to Pearl Harbor in World War II. Over 160 Allied submarines were hosted in Australia during the war. So whilst we didn't have our own submarine fleet, we very much did host our allies' fleets, which is reminiscent of the AUKUS treaty today as well. So it wouldn't be until the 1960s that the Royal Australian Navy submarine force that we know today would be established. But of course, that's a story for another day, not this day. So thank you for listening to this week's Two Ticks Submarine Talk on the early years of the Royal Australian Navy submarine force, the first three failures of the submarine force. And of course, if you are in Melbourne, around Melbourne, and you are quite interested, you can go and have a look at J7, the last surviving J-class submarine at the Sandringham Yacht Club, or you can go and you need a boat, but you can go out and have a look at the J3 that is also sunk off the coast of Queenscliff as well. Of course, there is a massive amount of information in the show notes if you're interested about submarines, British submarines, the submarine force in general, all of that stuff. Trust me, I've spent days on this. You are not going to run out of information to read. Have a look at the show notes. It's very fascinating, but it's a massive rabbit hole. I warn you, if you think, oh, that might be interesting, be prepared because you're going to go down a rabbit hole. It's fascinating.
Oh wow! Excellent. Well, I know a lot more than what I did a few minutes ago. Didn't know that we didn't have subs in the fleet for World War II. That was interesting. I didn't know that about that bit of history. And it's interesting that it's come. There's been a number of false starts.
It's surprising that the number of false starts is surprising, but of course, once you know the history, it does kind of make sense. And it also sort of brings me back to our first topic about overextending our submarine fleets, being mindful that these are expensive machines. They always have been. They are not a luxury, but there's a lot of navies don't have submarines because they're expensive. They're complex. They're technically complex in terms of the personnel you need to train to maintain them and so on and so forth. So, they are, it's not what you'd start with, right? If you're the designer of a brand new country's naval forces, don't start with submarines. It's terrible waste of money, as we've seen. So one thing I do love that kind of I feel like comes through in that story is, once again, Australia, we're more ambitious than we probably have any right to be. But it's not going to stop us. It's never stopped us before.
Yeah, very good. Oh, very interesting.
All right, let's move on. Instead of arresting Indigenous fishermen, the New South Wales government has begun to pay them to control sea urchin plague. After decades of defending their traditional fishing rights in the courts, Aboriginal custodians on the New South Wales south coast are now fighting to safeguard their saltwater culture from an even greater existential threat. The long-spined sea urchin, which is endemic to New South Wales, but it's exploded in numbers, transforming 50% of the shallow reefs that have sustained the South Coast people for a millennia into a barren, white rock wasteland. Young people from the Walbunja Indigenous community are reconnecting to traditional fishing practices in order to suppress a very yummy plague of long-spined sea urchins devastating southern Australia's reefs, seagrass and kelp forests. Months ago, it looked like the Walbunja youth John Carrigy was going to face jail time for diving for abalone and lobster, something his ancestors would have done for thousands of years. It was the fourth time, he'd said, that he'd been in court defending the right to practice his cultural heritage of freediving for his dinner. As it turns out, his was the most recent in a string of dropped charges against traditional fishermen, as the state of New South Wales has decided to close this chapter of Indigenous persecution. And for good reason. New South Wales specifically needs their help. Decades of overfishing of urchin predators like groper, snapper, and crayfish have allowed sea urchins to proliferate in New South Wales. Rising sea temperatures are extending their range into Victoria and Tasmania as well, and devastating kelp forests across a 2,000-kilometre stretch of Australia's Great Southern Reef. Marine biologist Kane Linton said that the warming ocean had created a Goldilocks zone on the New South Wales south coast where the conditions for sea urchins were optimal. He said, quote, "Southern New South Wales in particular has some of the largest barrens and some of the largest increases in the areas of those barrens," end quote. But he pointed to evidence that extraordinary potential for recovery once urchin densities were reduced. At a trial site in Merimbala, where 30,000 sea urchins were removed by local recreational fishermen group, a diverse selection of kelp and seaweed had started to grow back in only 10 months. With that potential comes the chance to develop a restorative fishery and the wrongs of the past. Unfortunately, in recent years, a string of prosecutions of Aboriginal cultural fishers have been sought after by the New South Wales government. Thankfully, a lot of them have been withdrawn or dismissed, while a native title claim has been determined on the South Coast, and custodians are now focusing on the urgent need to heal the sea country. Hopefully, this is a step in the right direction. So, I think this is one of the rare good news stories, good news all round, quite frankly. This shows us that we can get more done by working together than trying to fight against each other. But Ardeet, what did you think about this? Does this give you the fizz?
Yeah, I like this story. I liked it a lot. I'm glad we went with it. Yeah, look, it's not massively complex, but what I particularly liked about it was there was just a different way of thinking. So rather than go down, this constant stick approach, and there's time and place for. There is a time and place for that. Looking at a different way of doing this and saying, well, look, instead of going down there and knocking off the abalone and everything, and I know there's the grey area is the sort of the traditional culture and what was there before, how it was harvested versus, the demands and pressures of modern age, rather than going down that prosecutorial area. A number of people have decided, well, let's see if we can find a different solution. And I always love hearing these different solutions, and this one is sort of like, okay, well, look, we're not going to fine you, not going to throw you in jail. Instead, here's what you can do to not only help out that part of the environment, but actually, make some money. Help with the business that's there. I thought it was interesting because at first, when I first sort of read this thing, I thought it was this couple of young blokes who were sort of getting avoiding the legal ramifications of just a black and white way. But then when I got into it a little bit more, finding out that there's an industry that's being created here. And the thing that I knew that, sea urchins were tasty. I don't think I've ever had a sea urchin. Have you? Have you ever eaten sea urchin?
I have, but it wasn't like, it was like in a... I want to say stew, but that's underselling it. It was like part of a combination of things. So I can't say that I know what the specific I haven't just eaten one by itself, if that makes sense. Like it was part of a bigger meal. So, but I would like to. I've heard they're quite delicious.
After I looked into this a little bit more, so taking notes and looking at some of the things I was going to talk about, just seeing what a massive potential industry this is. As you said, they're endemic to that New South Wales part of the coast, as they are in some of the other regions of Australia. So with overfishing and taking away natural predators, they do tend to rapidly expand in numbers. But the regular harvesting them, and this is why I like it so much. It wasn't just these two young blokes, and I thought that was a feel good part of the story as well. But it's more than that. It's this regular harvesting of the sea urchins serves as a way to control the numbers. That doesn't have to be getting down there and smash them all with a hammer to get rid of them, or sort of getting rid of them as many as possible. It's if there's this constant harvesting, this natural utilization of the resources, the sea urchins get to have their life and habitat in there, but they don't wreak the disastrous effect that they do on the kelp, which then has so many flow-on effects. And kelp you look at and you think, oh yeah, it's a bit of seaweed waving around, but it's just such a vital part of the ocean floor. The number of animals that depend on it, fish and little like microscopic stuff right up to the, whatever you call the macro type of the fish. It's all an essential part of the environment. So it's like getting a little bit of having your sea urchin and eating it too, because that was the part that I didn't understand until I got into this a bit more, just how big a delicacy it is. I mean, there's a massive demand for it, and there's a massive demand for freshly harvested sea urchin and sustainably harvested, particularly in Japan. And we've got a lot of mates of the podcast over in Japan, and I'm guessing a few of you may well have eaten some sea urchin from New South Wales, especially given how you guys do your stuff with your fish markets and everything. I mean, you just got that so bloody streamlined. It's ridiculous. So I mean, that's just a whole amazing industry in itself. But to find out just how much in demand this is, and the thing that I thought, next time I have the opportunity to have sea urchin, I'm going to be having it. Just a couple of the taste: sweet, briny, and oceanic with strong umami notes. Texture: silky, creamy, and custard-like when raw and fresh. And appearance: bright yellow to deep orange lobes. Usually 5 per urchin. Now, look, they're essentially the genitals of the sea urchin, but apparently they're delicious. And when I read that, I thought, no, that's something that I am really going to be keen to try next time I get the opportunity. So yeah, look, it was a feel-good story. Good for those 2 young blokes. Great to hear about an industry developing in there, and exciting to hear about another potential export for Australia. Growing export for Australia. So yeah, got the big kevs about this one. What about you? How'd the story strike you, DK?
Yeah, I think this is one of these ones where, like, I guess it's frustrating that we are dealing with a situation where native custodians are having to go through legal battles to kind of just do their culture, right? And I understand that there probably is a framework, and a lot of these guys may have been, outside of their designated spots or haven't got their licenses, or, I'm speculating here because I don't know the specific details, but that feels very much to me like what would be part of this bureaucracy that just is kind of, we see this so often where it's almost like set up to fail, like they're very much like gotcha type situations. So I think there's a benefit there to the local community, because keeping these guys out of trouble is good for everyone, quite frankly, and it's good for clearly good for the environment to get them out there, getting them from a cultural point of view. We're reconnecting them with their heritage, their people, their like cultural activities, getting them back on the water and all of that kind of stuff. So that's a big tick for me. But also the environmental side of this it turns out we've got a population of sea urchins, an animal that's native to this area, but is just completely out of control because of bad fishing practices, from players in the past. We can right those wrongs, but also it turns out these are delicious. So it's like it's a win-win-win.
That's a plus.
It would be a real problem if it was like, the sea urchins are toxic, and if you touch more than 3 of them, you die. Like that would be a huge issue, right? But this really is one of these unique stories that's like, there isn't really a downside unless you're a sea urchin. And of course, they're not going to completely destroy the sea urchin population. They're mindful of that as well. I think the key thing here, which I guess we didn't go too much into, but the real big one is we need to reintroduce and and sort of nurture the predators of sea urchins naturally as well. Because a lot of stuff won't touch them. I've on many scuba dives, I've seen big sea urchins, and you can get some really big ones. And it's like, nope, like you keep away from that thing. It is a big spiky ball. You could not get a better warning to don't come near me, stay away from me. So there aren't a lot of natural predators to them, but there are some fish, and of course crayfish, which for our Americans that's like a lobster. They do like to get into them and pull them apart. So it's also heartbreaking to me that grouper are so overfished in New South Wales. They're massive, and they're such a beautiful, docile, calm fish, and they're not, as far as I know, they're not particularly good eating. So it's kind of a shame that they've been so overfished down there, because I can't really see a reason for it, but whatever. So I'd love to see that those sort of populations bounce back. But in the meantime, in the trial site, they picked out 30,000 sea urchins,
Wow.
which just gives you the scale of the plague. It very much is a plague. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I think it's a really good idea that now, instead of prosecuting these guys that are just kind of doing their thing, let's arguably doing the wrong thing, right? I'm not trying to hand wave away everything they were doing.
No. Yep.
But I do know a lot of the time, especially when it comes to the fisheries stuff, the regulations they're very tight, and they are very much kind of often set you up to fail unless you really know what you're doing, which I do think's like I've never been a big fan of, if personally speaking. But anyway, that's how it is. So now we're giving these guys not only the opportunity to not break the law and all the problems that come with that, but also hey, keep doing what you're doing. Now we're going to pay you. But at the same time, there's this flip-flopping of government that would, certainly sows a level of distrust with the population. It's sort of like, well, hang on, a minute ago you said I couldn't do this. Now you're patting me on the back and paying me to do it. Like, come on,
Yeah.
Well, hey, what do you expect from the bureaucracy?
That's right.
So yeah, I mean, all of that aside, I think it is really good, and you're right. There is a potential here for an export market. I don't know how long it'll last, but it sounds like this is a pretty bloody significant issue. So I don't think we're going to run out anytime soon. And if you are in Victoria or Tasmania, watch out, because this problem may be coming to you as well. And like you said, those kelp forests are so precious, and we really need to be aware of this problem before it completely, dominates. We see this in the Great Barrier Reef. As a Queenslander, I'm very, very familiar with the issues we have with the Great Barrier Reef, and a big part of that is the crown of thorns starfish. That similar sort of thing. It's native to the area, but it's just its population's got out of control, and it is just destroying everything, unfortunately. So we got to get out there and really nip these in the bud. So, all right, let's move on. It's time for This Week in Australian History.
This week in Australian history, we're covering 30th to 31st of May and 1st to 4th of June. May 30th in 1911, the Supreme Court of the Northern Territory is established. In 1923, Australia, New Zealand and the United Kingdom signed an agreement to share the administration of the former German colony of Nauru. 1925, Millicent Preston Stanley becomes the first woman member of the New South Wales Legislative Assembly. 1989, a Nanda Marga member, Tim Anderson, is arrested on charges relating to the 1978 Hilton bombing. He was actually acquitted later. There's a bit of controversy about that, but I don't think actually, I don't know. I haven't got it down here whether they did actually get other people, but yeah. I remember that being something that's sort of not really sort of. There was they weren't real. It sounded like there was a little bit of a. I don't know, just not something quite right with the acquittal and the way the case was handled and evidence and all that. There's a whole lot of sort of grey area on that. But, on the record, he got acquitted. 1991, a television report reveals that Bob Hawke made a secret agreement to hand over the ALP leadership to Paul Keating in 1988.
No way.
Yeah.
Shocking.
Yeah, exactly. Who'd have thought? Dishonour amongst pollies. May 31st in 1830, Gregory Blackson, William Lawson and William Wentworth arrive at Mount Blaxland, having successfully...
He wouldn't have named that after himself, would he?
No, it must have been after... Or he might have been, yeah. I saw it first. That's Mount Blaxland.
That's it.
Like he can just sort of see something. It says to Lawson and Wentworth. I thought, I just heard a noise down there. Can you just go and check? And then jumps up the top. Oh, look, there's my mountain. I wonder whether he. Oh, I'm assuming he was the senior or something.
Yeah, I've looked it up. He didn't name it after himself. It was bestowed by Surveyor General George Evans, but it was named after him.
Oh,
So
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
So
that's a little bit, yeah.
But, maybe old Greg gave it, greased the palms a little bit or something like that, I don't want to tarnish his reputation, but, I wouldn't put it past him. I'd do it. I'll be honest. I'd do it.
Well, if you're going to get to name it up, it'd be tempting. So, yeah. And they successfully crossed the Blue Mountains for the first time. And that opened up Western New South Wales to European settlement and agriculture. Obviously, Aboriginals were there, but that opened up to European. And look, it struck me thinking about that. We take so much for granted now that we've got these roads and paths and maps. And so a trip over the Blue Mountains. But it's interesting how significant exploration like this can be, and that it was this expedition, and sort of here's how you can get there, here's how, and getting the other side and thinking, if you get over this, look at what awaits you, and coming back with that news and information. It's interesting trying to think. Imagine if you couldn't drive, if all you could do was, walk or, just have a buggy pulled by an ox or something. Yeah. Very interesting hearing about these things that just do open up a whole vision of something new. 1886, the SS Laie Moon sinks off Green Cape, New South Wales, with a loss of 71 persons. That was a steamship. And in 1942, during the attack on Sydney Harbour, a Japanese midget submarine sinks the converted ferry HMAS Cuttable, killing 21. June 1st in 1878, Loch Ard, a clipper ship, is wrecked at Mutton Bird Island, just off the shipwrecked coast of Victoria.
What do you reckon? What do you reckon they found on Mutton Bird Island?
Have you ever eaten mutton bird?
No. But I'm imagining it's a bird that tastes like mutton. I'm guessing.
I ate it once, and it was the fishiest tasting, possibly. In fact, I was going to say the fishiest tasting bird. One of the fishiest tasting and fishiest smelling bits of meat that I think I've ever had. It was
really?
It was the butchers, and they said, we've got frozen mutton bird. I thought, you beauty, I've never had that before. Yeah. And bloody hell, you could smell it throughout the house. Mrs. Ardeet, she said, no. That other one gets cooked outside or not at all. And
it wasn't like gone bad or anything? It hadn't gone rancid or anything?
No, that was just what it is. I mean, look, the taste was it was very strong taste, and I happen to like actual mutton itself, so I can understand why you call it mutton bird, because it was just so Like it just sat with that real game. But, oh, my God, there was just such a strong fish smell and taste in there. Almost a little bit too intense. Oh, look, I haven't bought it since.
But I guess that tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't think, I must have this again. But look, I don't know, probably if I went to a restaurant and saw it there, I might be tempted, but they might not cook them in restaurants so they don't stick everything out. 1948, the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme was introduced by the Australian government to provide subsidised prescription medication. And 2005, a letter containing a white powder results in the 2005 Indonesian embassy bioterrorism hoax. So it was sent there soon after the 2004 Jakarta bombing, but it was a hoax, but it did highlight ongoing regional security concerns. June 2nd in 1802, Pemulwuy, he's a Bijagal warrior who led armed resistance against British colonies in the Sydney region for more than a decade. He was shot and killed. Following the killing of 4 white men at Parramatta and Toongabbie. So it was a significant moment in the early frontier conflicts, but he's also a significant Aboriginal figure as well. You know, one of those names that you sort of delve into a little bit more and you think, oh yeah, Pemulwuy. I remember hearing about him. So yeah, there's a whole lot of exciting is probably the wrong word to place, but it's interesting some of the Aboriginal resistance fighters who came to notoriety. I think I've said it before. It'd be interesting to sort of work out how we can work it into the podcast at some way. But yeah, anyway, that was it in 1802. Talking out loud there. 1909, Alfred Deakin becomes Prime Minister of Australia for the 3rd time, non-consecutive terms. So he gave it a few cracks successfully. June 3rd in 1929, Fremantle, Western Australia is proclaimed a city. 1969, the aircraft carrier HMAS Melbourne collides with the destroyer USS Frank E. Evans in the South China Sea, killing 74 US sailors. 1992, Mabo versus Queensland is decided upon by the High Court of Australia, and it made irrelevant the doctrine, the legal doctrine there of terra nullius, and it recognised the existence of native title land rights. So yeah, Mabo is sort of a shorthand for all of that.
A big deal.
Yeah, a big deal. Exactly. Yeah. So there's all the technical name for it and that, but if you say Mabo to people, they say, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about, the native title land rights. So yeah, it's an interesting shorthand that's coming to the vernacular. June 4th in 1629, the Batavia struck a reef on Beacon Island off the Western Australian coast, part of the Hootman Abrolhos. We had done a 2Tix Town Talk on that a long time ago. I can't remember off the top of my head where it was. Maybe just go into the site, do a bit of a search for Batavia. If I think of it, I'll put it in there, but otherwise, give that a whirl. 1942, the Uniform Income Tax Act, giving the Commonwealth Government the sole right to collect tax for the duration of the war, came into effect and largely remained in place after the war. Yet another shock. 1959, the Soviet embassy in Canberra is reopened after closing in 1954 as a result of the Petrov affair. That was the issues with USSR and Cold War espionage. And finally, in 1924, the first human voice was successfully transmitted from London to Australia from Marconi's experimental station, and that was a major milestone in global in global telecommunications. Now, I can't verify this, but I think the conversation rapidly degraded into friendly insults about us being a bunch of convicts and their beer being too warm, as you expect. So ultimately, though, I think it would have ended with a hearty cheers and a clicking of glasses across the pond. All right, that sound as we know it is the sound for the 4X bottle top quiz. Now, we're going way above the ocean this time. And in fact, these questions are out of this world. So from easiest to hardest, here's this week's quiz questions on the Australian space industry. Although it's funny, I can sort of understand it though. Once you start going into space, everything sort of, like in science fiction, space seems to be controlled by the Navy, and they're talking about ships, and it's all this naval thing anyway. So I suppose I'm going to shoehorn that in to say we're fitting in with the theme here. Question 1. Australia played, this is starting on the easier one. Australia played a key supporting role in the Apollo 11 moon landing. Which famous Australian radio telescope received and relayed much of the live television footage of Neil Armstrong's first steps?
Ooh, so I know this is part of I think it's called the Deep Space Network, I think, from memory. And it's the one in Canberra. I'm struggling to think what it's called.
I'll give you a hint. If you come up with the name, you're still going to be wrong.
Oh, was it not? Is it not the one in Canberra?
No.
Oh, was it the Parkes telescope? No.
It was indeed.
It was the Parkes telescope. Oh,
yeah. It wasn't. Remember that film, The Dish?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Yes, so that was it. And apparently the telescope was called Murray Yang. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I thought
it was the one in Canberra. No. There you go.
Yeah. When was the Australian Space Agency officially established, and what was one of its main goals?
I feel like the Australian Space Agency is pretty new, wasn't this like? I want to say it was like only a few years ago. Like I swear I distinctly remember them talking about this at the time. And I want to say it was around, I don't know if this was directly related or if I'm just misremembering, but I want to say it was around the time Trump did the Space Force thing. But I don't know exactly when that was, but I want to say it would have been like 2019, 2020, something like that, unless it's like the Australian Space Agency was reformed then. But I remember it being all over the news. So I'll say 2019.
Your thinking's good. 1st of July 2018. So yeah, you were certainly in the right path of the universe. And what did you know? Was one, or basically its main key goal? Which this is a bit of a hard bonus one.
I don't know, but I'm going to guess that it was to do with like, I don't know, like having like a consolidated mission control or something like that, right? Like we need they'll use like political jargon, like we need a consolidated mission control center for all space assets, or they waffle on something like that.
Yeah, it was to triple the size of Australia's space industry, which is in some ways arguably just as sort of nebulous as that sort of committee whiteboard outcome that you were describing.
Do you know have they achieved that goal?
don't know that at all. And I
feel like that's hard to quantify, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to quantify unless you want to quantify it, and then you can quantify it in whichever way you want. So look, I suppose it's only 8 years old, or coming up to 8 years old. So I really don't know more than that, TK. I just
okay, fair enough. Yeah, I can't say they fly under the radar. I think they got an astronaut. I think that was one thing, they were training an astronaut. But other than that, I can't say that I really know much about. And that was a few years ago, I think, from memory. So that was on the news. But other than that, I don't know.
Now the hardest one and the bonus question for this particular one, I'd be impressed if you get. But in what year did Australia become only the third country in the world after the USSR and USA to design and launch its own satellite from its own soil? And the bonus question, what was the name of the satellite? And I'll tell you, it doesn't roll off the tongue. So, become only the third country in the world to design and launch its own satellite from its own soil.
If I recall correctly, this was part of the what do you call it? Like at the Woomera rocket range, it was part of all the British testing and stuff like that.
You might actually know this. Of course, I'd forgotten you did your big series on Woomera. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I don't know specifically. I have no idea what it was called. It'll have, if you say it's not going to roll off the tongue, it'll be called like the I don't know, weather. It was probably like some weather satellite or something like that, or I don't know. I don't know what they would do, but it was probably very basic, I'm going to guess, and it was probably called like, Australian weather satellite for research or some crap like that, like you say, rolls off the tongue, right?
Yeah.
It's called the WOBSAT for short or some crap, and you're like, yeah, right.
That was
it sounds like I'm on the right path. I know how these organizations work. I'm onto them.
Yep.
When? That's the question.
Yes, that's the big question.
It's got to be, when was Sputnik launched? That was like at the late 50s, I think. So it's got to be, I reckon, late 50s, early 60s. I'm going to say 1960. I'll split the difference. 1963, I'm going to guess. Oh, and was there another part to this? Did you say what?
Oh, the bonus question was what it was called.
Oh, what it was called. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So I'll say 1963, and I don't know. It was called the Australian Weather Research Satellite or some crap.
Oh, God, yeah, get it closer. It was 1967, so you're not too far off there.
That's later than I would have thought.
Yeah, I suppose.
Considering no one else had sort of launched, like, I would have thought it would have been earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so that was the qualifier was designed and launched its own satellite from its own soil. So I think I haven't got it down in my notes, but I think when I read it from memory, it was something like there was 11 other countries that had satellites up, but that was our own one there, and it was called RESAT, WRE-SAT. So when you said WOBSAT, you're not far off. Yeah, so it's the Weapons Research Establishment Satellite. So you were, and you said research. So look, I'm going to give you a half a point definitely for that name there. So
do you know what it did? Like what the satellite did?
No, I don't. I don't know what the satellite...
Probably not a lot, I'd imagine. Like, if this is the first we're hearing about it, it wasn't groundbreaking research.
No, but I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, okay. So other countries... So you said 11 other countries had launched, but obviously not from their own soil or not from their own design. Like, they probably launched like American rockets or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Look, here's our design, send it up there, or, we'll take your design and launch it So, yeah, look, I was just focused on Australia. So I was surprised that we were third with that qualifier.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure the UK launched a few from Woomera as well, like satellites from Woomera as well. But I guess that's
not their soil. Yeah.
Doesn't count.
Exactly.
Cop that. Yeah.
Yeah. We beat you.
That's it.
You took all the tech back with you.
Do you know, did they slap like a big kangaroo on the side of the satellite or the rocket? Please tell me they did. Do you know?
Oh, they definitely did. It was a huge kangaroo. No, I don't. Yeah.
I'm gonna look it up, and I really hope that they did. You know, the boxing kangaroo or something on the side of it. It'd be just
so
perfect.
Remember, reset. That's it. Easy to remember. RESAT.
Yeah, rolls off the tongue. Doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Wow.
Good effort. Well done.
Thank you so much for joining us for another Australia Talks. If you have any feedback or suggestions for topics, please get in touch with us on our email at australiatalks@proton.me. We'd also be grateful if you could subscribe and give us an honest review, as this helps us out immensely. But the best thing you can do for the show is share it with a friend that you think would enjoy it. Otherwise, join us next week for another episode of Australia Talks. Hopefully, my voice is better. But thank you for listening, and don't forget, tell your mum I love her.
Thank you very much, DK, for a very, submarine episode here.